was quite as good as it would have been, but for the mocking, superior presence of his older brother. In all honesty, Tim did not doubt that he had tended to lord it over his little brother. Was there ever an older brother who did not? During all of Philip's adult life, his grudging discontent had been like a role perfectly inhabited by an actor with a gift for the part. Somewhere inside, Tim wanted to believe the real Philip must have lived on, capable of joy, warmth, generosity, selflessness. It was this inner, more genuine self that was going to be needed in the wake of Nancy's mysterious death. Philip would need it for his own sake if he were to face his grief head-on, as grief had to be faced. But more than that, he would need it for his son. It would be terrible for Mark if his father somehow tried to treat his mother's death as yet another typical inconvenience, different from the rest only by means of its severity. From what Tim had seen on his infrequent returns to Millhaven, Mark seemed a bit troubled, though he did not wish to think of his nephew in the terms suggested by the word troubled. Unhappy, yes. Restless, unfocused, afflicted with both a budding arrogance and what Tim had perceived was a good and tender heart. A combination so conflicted lent itself naturally to restlessness and lack of focus. So as far as Tim remembered did being 15 years old. The boy was trim and compact, physically more like his mother than his father, dark-haired and dark-eyed, though presently his hair was clipped so short its color was merely some indeterminate shade of darkness, with a broad forehead and a narrow, decisive chin. 2 steel rings rode the outer ridges of his right ear. He slopped around in big T-shirts and oversized jeans, alternately grimacing and grinning at the music earphoned into his head from an improbably tiny device, an iPod or an MP3 player. Mark was devoted to a strange cross-section of contemporary music. Wilco, the Magnetic Fields, the White Stripes, the Strokes, Yo La Tango, Spiritualized, and the Shins, but also Bruce Springsteen, Jimmy LaFave, and Eminem, whom he seemed to appreciate in an ironic spirit. His pin-up girl, he had informed his uncle in an email, was Karen O of the Yeah Yeah Yeahs. In the past 16 months, Mark had emailed his uncle 4 times, not so briefly as to conceal a tone Tim found refreshing for being sidelong, sweet, and free of rhetorical overkill. Mark's first and longest email used the excuse of a request for advice, Tim thought, as a way to open communications between them. From M. Underhill 697 at AOL.com to T. Underhill at nyc.rr.com. Subject: Speak, O wise one. Heidi-ho. This is your nephew Mark, in case you couldn't decipher the from line. So I was having this little disagreement with my father, and I wanted to ask your advice. After all, you managed to get out of this burg and travel around, and you write books, and you live in New York City, and all that means you should have a pretty open mind. I hope it does. Because you and you alone will decide what I do next. My dad says he will go along with you no matter what. I don't know, maybe he doesn't want to have to decide. Mom says, quote, "Don't ask me. I don't want to hear about it," unquote. That's what Mom says. I turn 14 next month, and to celebrate my B-Day, I'd like to get a tongue piercing. One of my friends has a pierced tongue, and he says it isn't too painful at all, and it's over in a jiff. I'd really like to do this. Don't you think 14 is the right age to go out and do something dumb, provided you do think it is dumb to pierce your tongue, which I obviously do not? In a year or 2, I'll take it out and go back to being boring and normal. Or what do you say, move up to a cool tat? Waiting to hear from the famous Unc, M. From T. Underhill at nyc.rr.com to M. Underhill 697 at AOL.com. Dear Mark, first of all, it is wonderful to hear from you. Let's do this more often. I like the idea of our being in touch. I've been thinking about your question. To begin with, I'm flattered that you thought to ask my opinion on such a personal matter. I'm also flattered that your father placed the decision in my hands.